It seems as though the medical system is just designed around like, oh, you have these symptoms, so take this pill. Instead of figuring out like, oh, well, maybe you're not getting enough exercise. Maybe you have a crap diet.
Great question. So I think we have a problem in the medical system where we love pills. But there's a big issue there, which is that we blame the system, but patients are a huge part of the system. There aren't great incentives for long-lasting, significant change. That's like literally why I started Healthy Gamer, because what I saw as a psychiatrist was like, everyone's just taking pills, but there's so much more to, and this is what my clinical experience was when I worked deeply with a patient, like you can get people into sustained remission with like sociopathy, narcissism, mood disorders. I saw a lot of great success stories and I was like, why aren't people doing this? And the big thing that is missing is that, I don't prescribe a whole lot. So I'll prescribe medications, but 30% of my practice is on medications. 50 to 60% will come in on medications. Then over the course of like 1 year, we'll pull half of them off. And so we don't emphasize the things that lead to mental health. We just focus on mental illness. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when I have someone who's like a narcissist, it's about understanding this fundamental, okay, you lack security in yourself. And the moment that you have security in yourself, the narcissistic behaviors have no foundation and they start to melt away. Like it's magical to see like what treatment really looks like. And so meditation is a huge part of that, at least in my practice. So I do think long-lasting cures are absolutely possible. That's the information that we try to equip people with. But there are two other things. One is that it's lucrative to prescribe medication. So, if I get, so an insurance company will pay me like $200 for a 15-minute psychoform visit. So I can see 4 patients an hour. I can bill $800 an hour. If I do psychotherapy and if I like work with my patients, I'll get paid like $250 or $300 an hour. So there's clearly a financial incentive to prescribe medications. But before we start demonizing all these greedy doctors and pill pushers, there are a couple of other things we need to keep in mind. One is that if I tell my patients, hey, you need to exercise, you need to stop eating processed food, there are studies that show that you can do stool transplants on people and you can give poop from a non-depressed person to a depressed person and their depression gets better, stool transplant. Mm-hmm. You can also eat certain foods like broccoli and high fiber diets that will reduce bifidobacterium and one of the other bacteria that lead to depression. So you can do all these things, but what do you think the likelihood is that my patients do it? Very low. So human beings don't like behavioral change. Behavioral change is hard for the patient. So what's way easier is giving them a pill. So I think part of the reason that medications have grown so much is because there's a financial incentive, sure. It's also really interesting if you look at the financial incentives because, so schizophrenia is 1% of the population. But if you look at the ratio of dollars spent on drug development is the numerator, divided by number of people who have the condition, right? So how much money are we spending to help how many people? At the top of that list is schizophrenia. So huge amounts of drug development in schizophrenia. And the reason for that is because schizophrenia is not curable, as far as we know. Generally speaking, that's what's accepted. So if you get a patient who likes a medication, you have a patient for 40 years.
So if you were in charge of the healthcare system, what would you change?
So first of all, our healthcare system isn't healthcare. It's sick care. You guys understand that? Mm-hmm. Right? So you don't go see your doctor unless you're sick. So one thing that's really interesting is if you look at ancient China, the way that or one part of ancient China. So I had a mentor whose mentor was a traditional Chinese medicine doctor who's a professor at Harvard. And he was kind of explaining to me one day that in ancient China, the way that you pay doctors is you pay a doctor a monthly fee to take care of your family. It's a subscription model, right? Subscription models before they were cool. Any month in which someone in your family gets sick, the doctor does not get paid. So I want you all to think about how that changes the incentive structure, right? So now we're focused on maintaining health. So what I've seen in kind of my practice, and also the reason that I started Healthy Gamer, there's even research on this. There are certain things called transdiagnostic entities. I'll explain what they are. So we have a bunch of these mental health conditions, right? We've got depression, we've got anxiety, we've got ADHD. Everything's getting worse. And so some really brilliant researchers sat down and tried to figure out, why is all mental illness getting worse? Like, it's weird, right? If we think about like a particular pathology, like when COVID got bad, it's not like everything got bad. There's one bad illness which is ripping through the world, right? So how can all mental illness be getting worse at the same time? Like, that just doesn't make sense. You guys following me?
Yes.
So what they discovered is that there are certain things called transdiagnostic criteria for mental illness. And what that means is that if you're perfectionism is a risk factor for anxiety disorders, it's a risk factor for depression, it's a risk factor for like OCD, it's a risk factor for OCPD. So there are some basic traits which increase your risk for like all kinds of mental illnesses. And which mental illness you get depends a little bit on your genetics or your environment or the kind of injury you have or whatever. So what I sort of saw is that there are some things. So a good example of this is like purposelessness. One of the two variables that correlates with pornography addiction the most is meaninglessness in life. So if you look at people who are addicted to porn and you assess their sense of purpose or direction in life, you find that they have very low sense of meaning. Perfectionism is another one of these transdiagnostic criteria. So if you target these transdiagnostic criteria, then everything down the road will get better. So what I would do is start to target those, and that's actually what we built at HG. So I saw that and I realized, okay, if I can give someone a sense of purpose in life, it's going to make their depression better, it's going to make their addictions better, it's going to make like everything in their life better.
So why do you think so many people are frustrated with the healthcare system today? Because it seems like for the most part, a lot of healthcare is villainized.
Yeah, so I think the reason that people are frustrated with the healthcare system is because the system fails to have a lot of fundamental things that we get elsewhere in the world. So I'll give you just a simple example. So let's say you want to eat an apple. How do you go about eating an apple, Graham?
Go to the grocery store, buy the apple, take it home. I'm weird. I cut my apple with a knife into little pieces so I could eat it because I don't like biting the apple.
So you pay $1.
Yes.
And then you give me $1 and I give you an apple.
Correct.
Right? So now we have a system where you don't pay me, you pay Jack $1. Okay? Now Jack has this pile of money and then you say, hey, I want an apple, Jack. And Jack says, you know what? Oranges are just as good. So according to me, oranges are just as good as apples. And by the way, they only cost 50 cents. So instead of you pay him $1 and you want an apple, he comes over to me and he says, give me an orange. And I say, okay. He gives me 50 cents. He keeps 50 cents and he gives you an orange. This is one of the problems. Now, if you're unhappy with this, you can't get rid of Jack because Jack is determined by your employer. You don't get to choose who makes your healthcare decisions.
Why is that system even in existence? It seems to me like it would make sense to cut out the middleman and just say, hey, I'm going to pay out of pocket for this and my cost is going to be 1/10. There was a great example of a TikTok that went viral. I'm sure you've seen it, about the guy who was calling for an ambulance and says, we got a bill for $1,600. And they said, well, if you don't have insurance, the bill's only going to be $300.
Yeah.
And he says, well, I have insurance, but I don't want to pay the $1,600. Okay, well, you have to pay that because you have insurance. But if you don't have insurance, it's $300. He says, well, why do I need insurance? I'd rather just pay the $300.
Can I cancel my insurance right now and then delay the bill and then talk? And they're like, no, you can't do that.
Like I was kind of saying, the reason it's messed up is because normally when you have a customer who's unsatisfied, you can shop around for prices before you buy something. You can change the store that you go to. You can't do any of that stuff in healthcare. Right? Because what is the cost of an ambulance ride? No one knows. Mm-hmm. And you don't get cost estimates before you do anything, right? Because no one knows what the cost is. And all of these layers of like obfuscation are 100% on purpose. Like they do that on purpose, right? So that no one knows. So you can't make informed decisions. You can't make your own choices. Like it's messed up. So that's why people are unhappy. The other thing to keep in mind is that, by the way, the person that Jack needs to convince is not you, right? It's your employer. Mm. So what happens is Jack goes to your boss who has an HR department with 5,000 employees. And Jack puts on a pitch and says, hey, we're going to deliver great healthcare and it's going to save you guys 20 cents on the dollar. You guys are paying $1,000 per employee for health insurance right now. If you take our plan, you're going to pay $800. That means $200 savings per employee. And then your employer is like, fantastic. Because someone at your employer is thinking to themselves like, hey, we need to make more money. We're trying to increase profit. They have an HR department that has KPIs, right? They're operating on that. So then Jack makes an agreement with your employer. You get very little say in it. You have to sign up for this insurance. The basic problem here is that there is nothing like a free market system. There's no system of feedback if something goes wrong.
Why does this even exist?
Great question. So this goes back to in the United States.
Yeah.
In Great Depression is the reason. So in the Great Depression, they had some kind of, I don't remember the 100% details, but they had some kind of thing where wages were controlled in some ways. This is when employers found a loophole, which is that if I can't pay my employees more, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give them benefits. I'm going to give them retirement. I'm going to give them health insurance. I'm going to give them life insurance. This is literally where our current insurance system was born, because prior to this, it wasn't like this. There was a fixture on wages, and then employers started offering benefits. Once one employer started doing it, then everyone has to compete. Now this guy is offering health insurance. Now I have to offer health insurance too. Once all the employers started offering health insurance, it no longer became an individual person purchasing their insurance. Normally, insurance is not something you utilize on a daily basis, right? The idea of insurance is it's a rare event, but somehow insurance has become baseline for healthcare. This is kind of how it happened. So then what happened is you have a bunch of people who have health insurance, and then there were other evolutions, like a health insurance company now has like a contract with a particular clinic where they will take their patients and then they get paid a certain amount. And so then all kinds of weird negotiations start happening between providers like doctors' offices and insurance companies, and then insurance companies and employers, and then employers to a person. But the connection between the patient and the doctor has like two financial middle steps in the way. And each of those people has their own financial incentives. Your employer, if they can save $100 on your health insurance, they make $100. So they're not incentivized to provide the best insurance for you. The insurance provider is incentivized to deliver the least amount of care possible and charge the highest premiums, right? If they're behaving in a fiduciary way. And I even saw this firsthand. I was in a meeting once, which I'd taken with a major investment bank. And what they were looking to invest in is something called a PPM model, which is like, I think it means like payer per month or something like that. So what they're looking for is companies that will go to these large companies like Google, and they'll say, we'll provide you healthcare for your employees. You have 1,000 employees, we'll charge you $100 a month to take care of your employees. And then the interesting thing about that company is invested in providing the littlest care possible. Right? So if I'm on the hook, if I have to take care of 1,000 people and you're paying me a flat monthly fee, regardless of whether I do anything or not, y'all following me? What that means is if no one needs healthcare, then it's straight profit. So this bank was like, yeah, if you're interested in doing that model, we'd love to talk to you. And I was like, wait, let me understand this. So you guys are looking to invest in companies that provide as little healthcare as possible. And they were like, yes. Because then it's 100% margin. If no one gets helped, then it's 100% margin.
How do you think that Luigi situation has changed the view of healthcare? Do you think that's going to make a long-standing impact?
I don't think it changed the situation. I think all it did was raise awareness about how bad the situation is, but I'm not even sure what kind of policy changes we'll see from that. Right? Like, it's not clear to me that that's going to change anything.
They're probably just not announcing where they're going to be holding their meetings anymore is realistically the big change.
Sure. So there may be like kind of safety issues there. But I mean, I think the system has been messed up for a really long time. And this is, I think, where people really like to demonize like one piece of the equation, right? So I don't think pharma companies are evil. I don't even think insurance companies are evil. I think like the insurance company exists to do a certain thing, right? So if you look at it from the perspective of the insurance company, it makes perfect sense. So I think this is a situation where you've got 4 different players that are all involved. You have the patient. The patient wants to get as much care as possible, paying as little as possible. Arguably, I think insurance companies could be the best player here because they're really the only ones that are incentivized to keep patients healthy. This is what's really cool about insurance companies. A lot of them are very pro-preventive care. So if they can give you a gym membership that prevents a heart attack, they make money. So I don't think insurance companies are necessarily evil, which I know a lot of people think they are. I think some of them are quite bad. But so you've got the patient who wants one thing, the insurance company wants another thing, the employer who wants another thing, and the doctor who wants another thing. So I think you just have 4, and that's the problem is in a normal transaction, you just have 2 people. So achieving an equilibrium there is like way easier.
How would you change that? What would you do?
I mean, so I am doing something. So I don't know how to change the system because I think at this point there are so many things that are entrenched. But I think that the understanding the system, that's part of the reason why we built HG outside of the healthcare system. So we want to be beholden to the people who give us money. That's the only person. That's why we haven't taken $1 of investment. And we get offers all the time. But because the reason is the moment that I take someone's money, right? People say, oh, you can grow 5 times as fast if you take $5 million today. But the moment that I do that, now my loyalty is divided. Now someone's in it for the money, which means that their influence on our company is also going to be money-based, right? They don't care necessarily about the people that we're serving. So what I really like about our model is we operate outside of the healthcare model because we don't provide healthcare. And a big part of that is also when you say, what would I change? I don't know how to change that entrenched system. But what I think we can do to improve people's health, which is absolutely what I'm focused on, is by teaching them all of the things that will help them improve their mental health. So if you are narcissistic, if you have NPD, you can do a shunya meditation, which will help you with that. If you're someone who's struggling with burnout, that's not even a diagnosis. The average therapist gets 0 hours of training in burnout, even though 83% of software developers in the UK are burnt out. The interesting thing is that there's a lot of progress that can be made if you just help people the way that they need to be helped. I don't know how else to put it, right? So that's why we build the things that we build. All these questions that y'all are asking me about, how do you know if you're depressed or not? Literally, I made a guide to depression where the second or the third video after the intro is there are 2 types of depression. There is something called pathologic depression, which is an illness, and there's something called congruent depression. Are you depressed because your brain is messed up and you have a cognitive bias and you're not looking at the world in the right way? Or are you depressed because your life genuinely sucks? And there are 2 pathways to fixing those problems. And the biggest problem that we have right now is that since I'm depressed, I go to a psychiatrist, I get prescribed a pill. That doesn't help with unhappiness. It only helps with mood disorders. So I think that there's a lot of stuff what I would do that's what I do. How to fix the insurance system? I don't know, man. I think there are problems with socialized medicine. There are problems with single payer systems. There are problems with all of the existing structures. It's not clear to me that any of those are the right answer. I think it's just way easier to teach people how their mind works, give them a high level of expertise to understand what depression is, what trauma is, how to shape you, and equip them with the tools to make their changes in their own life.